Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the false color feature on my camera monitor and use that to do a little bit closer look at some movie scenes. Now, I thought this would be just a neat way to learn from some other filmmakers and see how they were exposing their images within different movies. And to make it kind of fun, I figured I would pick some movies that I'm familiar with, the ones that I really like. And as I was choosing these different images to look at, I wanted to try to keep in mind things like the environment and the light source. Was it a daytime shot, nighttime shot? Was it in shade or direct sunlight? Those sorts of things. And yeah, just see what I could learn from other people as they were exposing their camera for these different scenes in movies. So let's jump into it. Now for this, I'm going to use my 5-inch FieldWorld Master monitor. I've got it set up right over here with a second camera just looking at the screen so you can see what I'm seeing. And if you don't really know much about false color, it's basically an exposure tool that allows you to break down your image into brightness values. Each value gets assigned a certain color. So if you look at my monitor right here, you can see on the right side there's this graph, and it runs in increments of 10. At the very bottom, we've got 0 IRE and 100 IRE up at the top. The IRE actually stands for Institute of Radio Engineers, and I think that's just the people, it's just the people who came up with this whole tool and system. So I don't know anything else about it, but that's what it stands for. And so we've got all these different colors in between the 0 and 100. When you're looking at your image, if you see a certain color, that is the color assigned to a certain value. So for instance, right here on the right, we've got some like dark gray, that's somewhere in the 30 to 40 IRE. Everything else that's pink, that's just really down and underexposed. So you can pretty much just see the exposure of your image. It breaks it down for you. And I think it really is a tool just to help you stay consistent. So if you're filming different scenes and you want your exposure to look the same between each shot, this is a tool that helps you do that. You can just see like, oh, are my skin tones the same? Are my shadows the same? My highlights are the same? It just helps you stay consistent, I think. Now in general, I've heard this rule of thumb that most skin tones, if they're properly exposed, are gonna sit somewhere around the 70 IRE value, which is like right up here. So it'll be interesting to look at some of these different shots and see if that holds true, if that's what other filmmakers did when they were making these movies. So we'll see what we see and go from there. It'll be cool. All right, so first up, I've got this clip from the movie Super 8. This is one of my favorite movies. And this shot is a little bit towards the beginning of the movie when they're at the train station. This is just like a nighttime scene. So they're at this train station. They've got some lights above them. So before we pull up the false color, we can see here on the left, we've got this hard edge light lighting up, just kind of separating him from the back. It's mostly a dark image. This is at nighttime. He's got like a soft light on his face. So let's turn on the false color and see what we get. Okay, this is kind of not what I was expecting exactly. We've got, at least on my monitor here, everything is showing up pink, which is really down like pure black and underexposed, which is a little confusing to me because if I turn off the false color, yes, it is like dark background, but I can still see some detail in the shadowy regions. Like I can see there's grass back there, but this is reading as like all pink, so really down low, which is kind of interesting. His skin tones are sitting, looking at the graph, somewhere in the 30 to 40 range, which is like 30 IRE below what I was picturing would be the case. Really, the brightest part of this image is on the side of his head where you've got the edge light coming in, and that gets up somewhere in the 70 to 80 region, it looks like. You can see a little bit of yellow right there and gray. So that's kind of neat. This image is definitely a lot lower than I was expecting. Let's take a look at a different image. Here we've got this clip of them looking at the train. It's an outdoor scene, so they got like all full daylight here, different situation. But the 4 characters are right there. Let's turn on false color and just see how they expose for this scene. Now, obviously everything's much higher here. This is daylight. So overall, everything is kind of sitting in that 40 to maybe like 40 to 50 somewhere in there, because we got some green up here in the grass, and a lot of the trees and landscape are all that gray color. Most of the highlights, if I turn off the false color, a lot of the highlights are really the light hitting the train in the background and some of the edge of the bike. So if I turn the false color on, you'll see that here. We've got just the brighter highlights. And those seem to be like sitting at 70. So that's kind of interesting. The skin tones and everything and the landscape, everything is lower than a little bit lower than I was expecting. Very interesting. Here we've got one more clip. I'll move on from Super 8 here, but they just have some really neat scenes that take place at night, and so I just wanted to take a look at them. So here we've got this scene, again, back at the train. I think this is after the train wrecks. So here we've got all the group of the friends, they're all standing there, mostly being lit up by like fire from the exploding train. So let's check out. This is again nighttime, so we'll see we've got I can still see some detail in the background, but we'll check out what this false color says. Okay, very interesting again. I'm still getting that like a lot of the pink saying I'm like super underexposed, which I don't know quite what to do with that, because everything is very pink and underexposed, which makes sense. It's nighttime, you can't see a ton of detail in the shadows, but you can see some, so maybe there's like a range down there in the pink that the monitor is just saying it's just really low exposure. But on their faces, they are again in the really dark gray and blue here at the bottom graph. So we can see that here. Here's the faces there popping just on the one side from the light source. Very interesting seeing a very much lower exposure level than I was expecting. Let's check out a different movie. We've got this scene from the movie Signs where the uncle and the kids are sitting on the couch and they're trying to protect their minds from being read by the aliens. So they've got their foil on their head, but this is indoors, sitting in, I don't know, it looks like afternoon. So we've got pretty natural lighting here from the sun for this shot. Let's check out the false color. Okay, so this makes a little more sense to what I was expecting. I can see here on his arm, it's in the gray value up towards the like 60, 70 IRE. And again with his hands, which makes sense because they've got like, if I turn the false color off, you can see like the sunlight coming in across the bottom here. So naturally that's gonna be a little more brighter. But up on their faces, it's still down in that 40 to somewhere in that 40 region is the exposure on their faces, which is kind of interesting. Everything is just so much lower than I was expecting to see. All right, let's jump into this movie. This is an all-time favorite, The Sandlot. Here we've got Benny the Jet right at the opening of the movie where he's up at bat when they're playing after school or something. This is again broad daylight. It's got sunlight hitting him on the right side. The left side of his face is in the shadow. But yeah, let's check out exposure here. Now this is still lower than I was expecting. I thought most of his face would be gray, but it's kind of in that green and a little bit of pink. His shirt is kind of gray, but it's a whiter shirt, so that makes sense that it's just brighter when the sun hits it. Yeah, nice. Overall, we've got pretty, it's like 40 to 50, 60. A lot of the exposure is sitting down around that level. Got this other shot here with all the crew from The Sandlot when they're all, I think this is the scene where they're talking to Smalls and trying to convince him not to go over the fence. So we've got their backs are to the sun here, so they've got the hard edge light on their shoulders from behind, so their faces are not in the sunlight. But let's see what we got. Okay, so they got the most of the sky is up in that 70 IRE. Again, the skin tones are down at around the 40 and below that, really, with the shadow. Their faces are kind of in shade because the sun's not hitting them. But overall, they're all kind of in that range, that 40 to 30 to 50 range. Irie, cool, great movie, great shot. Oh, we can't. It'd be wrong to skip this scene. So let's take a look at this. This is You're Killing Me, Smalls. Hamilton's showing Smalls how to make a s'more. So this is kind of what I expected. It's a mostly underexposed or low exposure here because there's not much light other than the candle is the key light, pretty much the motivating light source here in this shot. Hamilton is mostly lit up, but again, just lower Irie value for the skin tones. You can see some detail in the rest of the clubhouse, but according to my false color monitor, that's all down in the pink, which is, I don't know, feels a little not correct. Not sure about that. Let's jump to a different movie. How about Jurassic Park? Here we've got when they're looking, I believe this is when they're looking up at the Brachiosaurus. I think that's the one with the really long necks. So they've just arrived at the park and they're kind of getting a tour and they're looking up at the dinosaur. This is again like daylight. So let's check out false color. A little bit higher, but like the 40 Irie for most of the skin tones. The sky is definitely a little brighter in this shot. We've got, it kind of looks like it's a cloudy sky in general for this shot. So somewhere up in the 80 to 90 Irie value. But now I thought this would be neat. Let's take a look at this other scene from the Jurassic Park movie when the T-Rex comes out and the boy he's in the car and he's looking at the glass of water and it starts to ripple from the T-Rex coming near. So this is like the close-up on his face looking at the glass of water, but this is like nighttime scene, very soft lighting here. So the brightest thing is seems to be his right eye right over here. So let's see what I'm calling it. It's gonna be like 30 to 40. Yeah, it's somewhere actually. It's kind of a little bit of the 20 to 30 range, it looks like. Kind of his lower down on his face is much lower value. The bright looks like there's a hot spot there on the left, which is just the other car lights behind them. But yeah, I think it's interesting seeing like nighttime scenes because it all depends on like the mood of the scene and what's happening in it. I get that, but it's interesting seeing just slightly lower exposures on their faces. I don't know, something to keep in mind. Oh, and speaking a lot about skin tones, why don't we check out Mr. E.T.'s skin tones. Here we go. This is a great movie. This is when he's just living at home. I don't know if this is when he's watching TV or something, but got all these wrinkles around his eyes. I always love that. For an alien, he looks so nice and friendly. Let's check out the false color. Okay, so he's got that, obviously he's got the light from the window hitting him here, so it looks like the edge of his face is up in that like 70 to, it's more like the 60 and 70 range right there on the edge, but everything else kind of drops off on the right side of his face when more of the shadow is. There is a pretty big contrast ratio in this shot. We've got bright windows and then kind of the right side is more shadowy. It's kind of hard to see the detail up here in the right side of his face, but yeah. One more great film. We've got Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe here. This is when they all are busting out of the wardrobe when they finally, at the end of the movie. But here we've got Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy. Looking at Mr. McCready as they come back out. Looks like Lucy's got the brightest light hitting her face and it's kind of crossing, hitting Edmund as well. Peter and Susan kind of are a little bit under our lower exposure from them, so we'll see that here in the false color. So Lucy's face here is up in that 60 to 70 range, a little bit of Edmund as well. But Peter and Susan are down in that 50 to 40. So got like a little bit of a spread based on where they are and the lighting. All right, why don't we take a look at Indiana Jones? This is right towards the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark when he kind of gets introduced. We've got a really bright contrast. Let's see what this looks like. So here we've got just kind of gray skin tones there, really shadowy and dark on this side. Some of the highlights in the landscape. Yeah, again, just he's brighter on one part of his face, but the rest falls off in the shadow. All right, we'll round this out, finish up here with 2 more shots. One, we've got this shot from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I figured it'd be worthwhile to throw in an older time movie, one that was made a while ago, and see if anything is different with this specific one. So here we've got the beginning scene where Dick Van Dyke's singing with his 2 children. This is a great movie. I love the music in this one, and I still sing it to this day. So here we've got, he's sitting here with his kids, singing along. Let's check out the false color. This is still really similar exposure level compared to the other movies. Really down in that 40 to 50 range with kind of across the board. This one's really low. We've got a lot of the gray, 40, IRE. So still, even though it's an old movie, still similar exposure, it appears. And lastly, we will round this out with a shot from Napoleon Dynamite. Napoleon and Kip here. They're here at Rex Kwando, and Kip here is deciding to volunteer, raising his hand. This is just more of a comedy movie, so obviously the lighting is less dramatic for this kind of a movie. So, which is what we see here. It's not very dark shadows, just kind of very evenly lit across the board. Still, so Kip's face, you got a little bit of gray there, so that's 70, but everything else is still just down in that 40 to 50 range. The woman's shirt behind them has that gray. So that's it's what we've been seeing so far, so interesting. All right, well, very cool. It's neat to just take a look at some of these scenes and just see what I could learn. I was mostly interested in the skin tones because I feel like that's something is always a little tricky to nail. Even just for any of these videos that I make here on my channel, I feel like I'm always trying to decide, like, is my face way overexposed or is it underexposed? And this is interesting though, because I generally have been trying to follow that rule of thumb of like, you want your skin tones at 70, but a lot of these movies were significantly lower than that. Very cool though. Very neat tool, one I've really appreciate using, again, because I feel like it helps with you can get a consistent look across different shots. If you're using this, you can see if you're balancing out your exposure across the board for what you're doing. Anyway, thanks for hanging out and watching this video. If you found it helpful or insightful or you just enjoyed it, leave a comment, hit the like button. And if you want to catch any new videos I put out, just consider subscribing. Otherwise, I will see you around.